So it's official. Our next disc is a distance driver. And this disc is unlike any disc we've ever made before, not just because it's a distance driver, though that is also true, and it will be Trash Panda's first distance driver, but because this disc already existed. So now we're not just recycling plastic, we're recycling a mold. I don't know when I first had the idea. It definitely wasn't when I started Trash Panda, because I never imagined it when I started Trash Panda, but maybe 2-ish years ago after we'd released the Inner Core, I started to think about like, ooh, maybe one day we could recycle a mold, like a pre-existing mold, the steel or aluminum itself. So I ended up trying to find a mold that we could recycle, which just didn't work out because either the price was off or people just didn't want to, or the mold was literally in the wind, like no one knew where that mold was. But as is like so true in life, sometimes you can't like seek something out. Instead, you just have to wait for it to come to you. So I kind of shelved the idea, thinking like, all right, one day this might happen, but I'm just not gonna force it. And then I got a call earlier this year. They told me they had a mold, and then they asked if we were interested in buying it. There's so many questions that immediately come to mind. Like when buying a mold, you're basically buying, think about it as a used car. Like you can buy a new car or you can buy a used car. And when you buy a used car, you're basically getting a lower price with increased risk, right? And oddly enough, there are some like crazy similarities between molds and cars. Like you have to look at the mileage, for example. How many times has the mold been opened and closed? Because at the end of the day, that equates to wear and tear. For example, on the Inner Core mold, we've opened and closed that mold over 120,000 times. It's a decent amount of wear and tear. So how much wear and tear does this thing have? What's it actually made of? Like, is it steel or aluminum? And why? Like, is it a bad disc? Like, why would you want to sell this mold? Well, come to find out, the mold has basically for over a decade been a very, very, very heavy paperweight. And while this mold had a lot of potential, it just never made it into production. So I decided the first step was a test drive. Like, how does the disc fly? And I'll never forget being with a buddy of mine, actually one of the guys who introduced me to disc golf, and we were throwing the disc, and he said to me like, okay, there's a lot of risks involved still with this, so why not just design a new one? And you could make the mold yourself, you don't have the same risks, you know it all works, etc. And I was like in my run-up while he was saying these things, and I threw the disc, and it was just like an easy 400 plus foot shot. And I just remember being like, that's why. Like if it flies like that, why would we even try to redesign something like this? Why not just use something that already exists? So I sent this person an offer for exactly what they were asking for, which was the price they asked for, and then an NDA, which is why I can't name who this person or the company behind this disc is. Regardless, the other piece of the offer was that instead of covering the shipping costs, I would actually show up and pick up the mold myself, because then I could actually, as I said, look under the hood. And I think used car analogies are good in this context because it very much so is similar to that. But did my wife and I also just buy a used car? And is that top of mind? What I didn't expect was for the person to say, yes, if you come this week. Okay, we made it to the hotel. Tomorrow's the day that I am picking up the mold. And you might think at this moment, after months leading up to this, that it's just excitement, but honestly, right now, sitting in a hotel, states away from home, I'm just wondering if this is a huge mistake. Like, we don't have all the data. We're taking a significant financial bet on this, really, when all is said and done. And I'm starting to go through, my head's just spinning with all the things. Like, my head's just letting me think of all the things that could go wrong here. But if I knew what I know now, back when I started Trash Panda, I don't think I ever would have started Trash Panda. So maybe there's something about living in this nerve-wracking state of like, now I know more, thus I'm nervous because I'm not as naive as I was. But like, we still have to take these risks and these jumps and these leaps. And some of them pay off and some of them don't. And at this very moment, I don't know which one this is. If it's the payoff or the doesn't pay off. All I can say for sure at this very moment is I am about to buy some steel. Even then, mostly steel, maybe steel plus aluminum. I guess I'll find out tomorrow when we open it up. But I'm buying a metal block that has a disc carved out of the center of it. Whether that means it's a mold that'll work for us, whether it means it's a disc that we can make and produce, whether it means X, Y, and Z, I just can't even let myself think about that. The next morning, you probably could guess this, but I woke up without an alarm, even though I set 3. Woke up at 5:15, all on my own, because nerves, and I needed to beeline it straight to Home Depot. So actually the day before, I had landed, went straight to Harbor Freight to pick up some stuff that I realized I forgot, because in my check bag, I had put together like a very random assortment of tools that I was like, I might need these things. Then I needed to get a strap so we could actually lift the mold from Harbor Freight. And then I needed to get an eye bolt because I'd forgotten to grab a couple of eye bolts from the shop. And if you didn't already know, the way you pick up a mold is basically with an eye bolt. So I went to Home Depot knowing they probably wouldn't have an eye bolt that was big enough because you really need these industrial eye bolts to lift molds being so heavy. But I just decided I'm gonna get the biggest one they have and we will see what happens. Driving up, I remember thinking, this person probably thinks it's gonna be relatively quick because I think they were planning on just loading it into the back of a truck, but I had not rented a truck.
All right, 8:30 a.m., 8:28 technically, we're 1 minute away and the nerves are getting real. Is Jesse about to pick up a full-scale industrial mold in a small SUV? And yes, I don't know if this is a good idea, but it's what we went with. As far as renting a car, this is what was available, and I want to open up the mold and look at it. And then I chose the rental with the fold down seats because I figure 4 or 5 pieces should fit throughout here. I don't know if this was a bad idea, but here we are. We're in it now.
Humidity had to be at an all-time high, and my suspicions are immediately confirmed there's not an eye bolt on top of this thing. So with an eye bolt that I would have bet money on would have never fit, even walking up to it, I'm holding it and I'm like, oh no, this thing is actually too big, not too small. I reach down and it twists and fits perfectly in. I guess I know how Cinderella felt now. So initially we picked it up off the pallet, and as we were doing that, actually, oh my gosh, it's right here. Okay, this is the eye bolt. As you can see, where is it? 300-pound capacity. Molds do not weigh 300 pounds. Actually, right when we got there, I pulled up a magnet to different components of the mold to see if it was aluminum or steel. It was magnetic, which means it was steel, which also means it definitely weighed more than 300 pounds. But as you can see, this puppy is unscathed and it looks totally fine. So basically the plan was to lift with this as little as humanly possible so that the second the mold was up off a pallet, I could use a spare 2x4, push the pallet out from under it, and we could lower it to the ground without this thing breaking. By the way, I feel like I need to hang this up in our HQ somewhere or something because this is just crazy. Every time I look at this, I'm like, I cannot believe this happened. So we got the mold on the ground, and then it kind of took me back to when we first were opening a mold on the ground at our old HQ. And I knew nothing about molds. I remember Kyle and I were like, what is all of this? Like, we didn't know what any of it was. I was so nervous. And it was so crazy because even though it took a while, I didn't have all the perfect tools, and I was going slowly trying to learn how the mold worked, I knew what I was looking at. And I don't know, in just barely over a year, it was just validating how much we are learning and have learned. Okay, so where were we? We're on the ground. Oh yes, okay, so then it proceeded to be 3 of the sweatiest hours of my life. Regardless, I am happy to report that we were able to successfully get the mold into the car, and as I was driving away, I just took a selfie that, looking back on it, I feel like says 2 things to me. First, it just reminds me of how uncomfortable I was, having like literally sweat through the top of my jeans. And then second, I feel like you can see in my face that I'm still not sure if it was a good idea. And honestly, I'm still in that moment. I was able to drive back, plus we safely got the mold back into the warehouse, and then I was able to take it apart all the way, which I didn't do at that warehouse because I didn't have all the right tools, but being back at our shop, I had all the right tools and was able to take it all the way apart and really look at the entire thing. And now you're fully caught up to where we're at. We haven't put the mold in yet. I've got it fully apart and I've tested every piece of it, and let me show you what we're working with. So first up, we've got a couple funky pieces on this mold that don't exactly look like pieces we had before. And that's not necessarily a big issue. It's just a different type of mold building and, you know, more things for us to learn. But what you'll probably recognize is these 3 pieces right here. You've got the core, the stripper plate, and the cavity. Basically, these 3 pieces are where the disc is made. So you've got the core, which is the bottom of the flight plate. The stripper plate actually interfaces with this piece and becomes the outer bottom edge of the rim, or the wing, if you will. And then the cavity is the top of the disc. Then on top of those 3 pieces, you'll notice that that hole is a little bigger than the injection point you're used to. And that's because over here, we have a hot runner. I'll talk more about what a hot runner is at some point, but basically for now, what you need to know is this little wire is a broken piece, so we have to replace that. And additionally, we had to get this 2-zone hot runner controller. So the only question that's left is, does the mold actually work? And we still don't know. And some of those risks that I was worried about are still worries, if I'm being totally honest. But we've got all the pieces in place at the moment. I think we can test it soon. And the one thing I feel confident about no matter what is that we as a team have learned so much and have the tools and ability to solve any problem we may encounter. What will those problems be? Still don't know, but that's kind of the name of the game around here. And that's the next video, I guess.